There we are. Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Hoops HD Bracket Rundown. This is our weekly. David's excited over here. This is our weekly podcast where we run through the bracket as we see it right now, and we're doing a little bit of a different format tonight than we've done so far this season. But let me start by introducing our panelists who are with us. First of all, the #1 rated drunken puppet on the internet, David Griggs. David, how are you?
I'm doing great. I want to see the bracket, Chad. Show me the bracket.
All right, we'll get into the bracket in just a couple seconds here.
Show it to me real quick. You don't have to show it to Joby. Just show it to me.
Also back with us, though, is Joby Fortson. Joby, how are you tonight?
Doing well after a little bit of a hiatus. It's nice to be back.
Great to have you back. Our format for tonight is a little bit different than we've been doing. What we've been doing the last few weeks is building a 1 through 68 seed list or S-curve on the air with me kind of acting as the arbiter and our panelists throwing out the teams at me. Going to change the format up a little bit tonight. What we did was we had David, Joby, as well as John Stalika, who can't be with us tonight, and myself, all created our 1 through 50-ish, 1 through the end of at-large S-curves or seed lists. I put them all together, basically cross-country scored the lists by the way we came up with them, created a consensus seed list. We then bracketed it, and what we're going to do here tonight is actually reveal that bracket on the air. Nobody other than I have seen it before so far.
Just show it to me.
You ready to see it here?
Yeah, I want to see it. Here it is.
Okay, you sure?
Yeah, right. I'm ready.
All right, give it a second here. It should be coming up any second right on my screen. Do we see it?
It's black right now, Chad.
Okay, well, it's getting there. It's getting
there. It is. Yeah, there it is. Chad, it's blank. It's just a blank bracket. Where are the teams?
Well, that's exactly right. It is a blank bracket, and I'm going to kind of, play Greg Gumbel here, I guess, and reveal the teams kind of like he does, although we're going to reveal them 1 seed line at a time, starting with the 1 seeds. And what I'm going to invite both of you to do, and I will comment as well, is compare what the consensus was to what you actually thought it would be. If there's a team here you don't think belongs, make the case why they don't belong. If there's a team here that was left out that you really think belongs there, make the case as well. But are we ready to begin showing the teams?
I'm ready.
Okay.
I'm ready.
Go ahead.
Well, here comes on the 1 line. Not going to be very much of a surprise, but Oklahoma, the #1 overall team. Iowa came in at 2, Xavier at 3, and Villanova at #4 overall.
Wow.
Let me start with you, David. Any shocks here?
I don't have any problem with this. North Carolina was my overall #4. I'm a little surprised that our staff did not have North Carolina up on the 1 line, considering how much our staff seemed to like North Carolina. A little bit of a change of heart. I know they lost at Louisville. My problem with them, and the reason they were #4 overall for me and not higher, was they don't have that monster road win. Every other team on this line does.
Joby, I don't think you had North Carolina on your 1 line either. You did have North Carolina on your 1 line.
North Carolina, like David, it was my last 1 seed. I had him instead of the Musketeers, but that's a question completely of, are you going by paper or eye test? I would agree with those that would put Xavier as having better paper right now, precisely for some of the reasons given. Lack of the road win. They actually, North Carolina's limited in the number of big wins that they have in the top 50 right now. I can see the argument for it on paper, but just remember, when we get to other components, there are a lot of people that look really good on paper that I have a feeling cut against common perceptions, and I will have followed through on that as we get down the seed lines.
Well, I will tell you that I may have been the one that skewed North Carolina off the 1 line. Not only did I not have them on my top 4, I actually had them all the way down to 7th overall. And my biggest complaint is a lack of top 50 wins at Florida State, at Syracuse, Maryland at home. That's it. When compared to the other teams that we're going to be looking at for the top 2 lines, very low number of that. Add in a very bad loss at Northern Iowa. And yes, I know they have a lot of top 100 wins, but when you really look at teams that are solidly in the field right now, you've got 3 wins by North Carolina. Maryland, Florida State, Syracuse, and that's it. Nobody else they've beaten is solidly in the field. And maybe you can make a case that Clemson is solidly in the field or not at the moment. We're going to be talking about the Tigers a little later on. Even that was a home win, though. And that's why I don't think
And
that they.
Syracuse was on the road, and Syracuse, I have a feeling, will wind its way into our bracket.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, so Syracuse, Florida State, Maryland, those are the 3 wins that are against this bracket. I just think that 3 wins against the bracket is not enough for a 1 seed when you compare them to Villanova, Xavier, Iowa, a couple of teams we're going to get to on the 2 line as well.
North Carolina's going to have to prove it later, without a doubt. They have their chances. They're going to Charlottesville. The winner of that game, I think, will get a huge boost one way or another.
Yeah, and they've got Duke twice, obviously, and Duke is not what they've
Duke
been.
twice, exactly. Yeah. They've got some chances to do it, but they've got to perform. I will say the one bad loss, while you can't excuse it 100%, that was a loss without Marcus Page, and that is a big deal. We're going to be giving exceptions, I feel like, to a team from Wichita about that. Yeah. North Carolina deserves the same consideration.
Yeah, I agree with you, but the big thing when I'm looking at North Carolina is not even the Northern Iowa loss. It is the lack of wins against the field here.
Yes, I get the paper argument completely.
Yeah.
Well, are we ready for the 2 line?
We are.
Okay, here we go. Drum roll, please. Here is our 2 seeds. Virginia, Kansas, North Carolina, and Oregon come in as our 2 seeds, and I can give you the exact order here. Say half a second here. It was North Carolina was number 5 overall, followed by Virginia, Kansas, Oregon in that order. And the big surprise here may be the Oregon Ducks making it all the way up to the 2 line. David?
Yeah, I had Oregon, I believe, on my 3 line, and I thought I had them higher than what most of the average would have. I'm a little surprised to see them all the way up here on the 2. That means everybody but me had them as a 2, I would imagine.
Not quite. John was actually with you, but Joby and I both had them as a 2 seed. I had them as my 8th overall. Joby, you had them at 6 overall. So I'll give you a chance to defend the Ducks here.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to. There's only one team, and they're on the 1 seed line that fits the number 1 criteria for David Griggs, which is road wins against quality opponents. They got 4 of them. That's pretty strong. On top of that, they've beaten the field, and the Pac-12, I think we can agree, is one of, if not the best, but at least one of the elite conferences this year. They lead it, and they're on their way to winning it outright. They're starting to be that team that breaks out from the pack here. I like what they've done. They're really gelling right now, and they passed the eye test for me now. I've been able to see them a few times. I won't solely rely on eye test, but they've got some good paper to back it up. I'll defend them on this 2 line.
They're really good. I mean, I don't put a team on the 3 line that I don't like. I thought I would have them higher than everybody else, and it turns out I had them lower than everybody else. I was ready to come on here and talk about what I liked about them, thinking I would be defending. Thinking the question would be, well, why did you have them so high? They're good. The only hang-up for me, and this is relatively speaking, I mean, relative to the 2 line, the only hang-up is I thought that they played I thought they were a little bit too soft out of conference.
Mm-hmm. That's a legitimate claim.
Yeah.
That's a fair claim. I like what they're doing now.
Oh, I love what they're doing now.
And they've been on a roll.
And Joby said something, do you go eye test or paper? I go both. I have teams ranked inconsistent with their paper as well at certain points.
and that's a great point. I viewed Oregon as excelling surprisingly in both, beyond what I expected even a month ago.
If we're ready, let's move on and reveal the 3 line, and I will give you note these teams, the order after they show up, but the 3 line, Maryland, Texas A&M, West Virginia, and Michigan State. The exact order was Michigan State, West Virginia, Maryland, then A&M was the last team on that 3 line. A&M, as we're recording, is in a lot of trouble at Vanderbilt, but just for reference sake, these are through games of Wednesday, February 3rd. We did not include any Thursday night games in these rankings. We're actually recording this before any of the Thursday night games have even gone final, so A&M might slide down if they lose this game here tonight. But let's take a look at this line here. David, your thoughts on it?
Well, my thoughts are I'd like to go back to something you said. I think it was a week or so ago. You and Lee. A&M is not a 1 seed. I was correct on that. They are not a 1 seed. That's my thought.
They're not a 1 seed. I'm going to concede that at this point too. But Joby, your thoughts when you look at this line? Anything that stands out for you?
Hey, I'm the one who drug A&M up to this level. I'll be the first one to admit it.
Uh,
Because of their win over Iowa State in the SEC Big 12 Challenge, I said, well, there's a collection of teams. There's a collection of teams in the Big 12, and they might be at the front of them except for Oklahoma and West Virginia to a degree. And so, so as a result, I put A&M, and if this Vanderbilt score holds, way too high, they will drop not just one or seed line in my view, but a couple with such a loss. Because there's a lot of competition when you get to the 3, 4, 5 lines, as you'll find out. You can blame me, but besides that, it's a solid group, except for one team that, if you've read my nitty-gritty reports, I will mention it here. God-awful paper, even after the Iowa win for the Maryland Terrapins. They have 2 wins against the tournament.
and I was going to address that because you did not have Maryland.
I just can't do it. This is where you really have eye tests, but their eye test isn't that good.
Their eye test isn't that good either. I agree with you.
At home. I mean, this is not a, hey, this is a tournament team. This is a team that I did put as one of my 4s. But no way are they a high protected seed like the public wants to say. The public wants to put them at the 1 or 2 line, and I find that ridiculous. Are you not watching the games, and are you not reading their resume? I'm sorry. Yes, they have great names like Trimble and Lehman. They've got, they have the name Suleiman. But that, just because you have names and you have a solid coach doesn't equal if you don't have the results to prove it.
Well, let me be one of the people to defend the Terps, because John and I both put them in at number 10 overall, which was the highest of the 3 of us and of the 4 of us here. And the one thing I look at the Terps is not necessarily who they beat, but who they lost to, or more specifically, who they didn't lose to. They only have 3 losses. At Michigan State, at North Carolina, 2 teams that are already in this field, the third one at Michigan. They just haven't done anything bad. I think one bad loss here, if they go out and they lose,
like to Nebraska,
to Bowie State coming up. But if they lose to Nebraska, if they lose at Minnesota coming up February 18th, very different. I see the reason to drop them and drop them significantly, but they haven't lost a game that I didn't almost expect them to lose, and it's hard for me to say that this is a good team or a bad team. I think we still have a lot that we're going to find out. They do have 2 games with Purdue left that will help show us a lot more what this team is about.
Every team that we've listed so far, and I have a feeling the next line will also qualify under this category too, will double, not just have more, but double the number of wins against teams in our field tonight than Maryland has.
Well,
double. It's not like Maryland doesn't play, plays in a bad conference or something, and it's unfair like it would be for Little Rock or Valpo or someone like that.
Let me bring something up here. There's a team that had a lot of discrepancy in this line that we have not addressed yet, and it was because of me again, I think. West Virginia. A couple of the fields they were, I think, actually up under the 2 line.
I had them on my 2.
And I had them on my 4 line. I had them number 16 overall. And my problem, again, with West Virginia is the same thing kind of what we just discussed with North Carolina. They have 3 top 50 wins. One of them, Texas Tech, who is not going to be in this field. Spoiler alert there, I guess.
But it was at Texas Tech. I mean,
they great win at home against Kansas, great win at Iowa State. I can't fault them for those 2 wins, but really not much more beyond that. And that was my thing against West Virginia. Now, I understand that win at Iowa State.
You just cut your argument against Maryland. They're Maryland, but with better wins.
They're Maryland with better. I guess you could argue that. Maybe I just. But they're Maryland.
And remember, I do have one at-large team that you didn't mention that's turning in. The win is looking better and better by the day. Is San Diego State.
And I agree with you. That San Diego State win is getting better and better. San Diego State. May or may not be in this field. If they are, it's probably as an at-large bid, as an automatic bid. So we'll see where they come in.
Their way in is an at-large. I'm not saying they're there yet necessarily, but they could earn their way in.
Well,
I think they earn their way in if they win out. So,
okay. Well, let's go ahead and take a look at the 4 line. These are the last of our protected seeds, And what we have here is Utah, Miami, Texas, and Iowa State. Almost a little surprising. Texas, very high ranking for them. The actual order here was Iowa State, Miami, Utah, Texas in that order. Let's start with this Texas team. Joby, you are, I think, the only one actually that had them in your top 16, but by everyone, the rest of us all had them so close to the 16, they actually end up moving up because of the disparity of teams. So let's start.
Well, I mean, when I look at the 16 teams that we have here, it includes my top 17, so it's it's not crazy. I like Texas as that team that is really gelling now. They have some really dandy wins. Like, we talked about North Carolina already. They beat North Carolina when North Carolina was pretty much, I mean, yeah, you could say, Meeks, et cetera, but they were ready. And Texas beat them pretty much full strength. Texas has gone through. They've piled up very nice wins in the Big 12, and this Texas team, I think, is starting to find itself too. You gotta like what they look like lately. I mean, Shaka's doing the right things there. He's pulling the right buttons. I think the players are getting the system. Havoc is starting to be understood by the players, and I recognize that fact as well.
I can't believe how well he's done there. I thought they might be a fringe tournament team this year, and now we have them as a fringe protected seed. I just hugely surpassing all expectations. A tremendous coaching job by him. I had them very close to this range too. It's not like they don't belong up here. I don't think I quite had them up here, but I had them very close.
Yeah, David, you actually had them at number 17 overall. So, and that's one of the reasons you had them 17th. I had them 17th, and so when you've got that ended up having pushed them up to 16.
I had them 15th. It's not like we were way off.
We were all very close. John had them the lowest at 19th, but team that David you had 19th overall that made this group was Utah. Do you want to address them? Why you didn't think they were a protected seed?
Yeah, let me get to that. It's because they're not as good as the other teams that I had that were protected seeds. Give me a second here, Utah. I think one of the things that kind of hung me up, they do have some nice wins, like the win at Colorado, but after that it kind of dips off. The neutral floor win against Duke was good, but I think you don't want to overvalue that considering Duke is not a protected seed caliber team. The win at home against California only has one true road win, so I'm not really giving them a whole lot of credit against that. And then once you get below that, I just don't think the win at Washington. I just don't think the top of their paper is as good as the teams that I had ahead of them.
Well, they got the win at Colorado, the win at Washington. When I actually looked at them, they beat the San Diego State team we were just discussing about.
At home. At a time when San Diego State was not exactly playing the way they are now.
Right, but they've got wins over Oregon State and Stanford, who will be teams we may have a discussion about tonight, whether they make the field or not.
Well, okay, but they beat Oregon State. Oregon State has been kind of pitiful on the road.
I agree. These are home wins. These are not road wins. But the Colorado win, the Washington win on the road, Duke, Texas Tech, Temple on neutral courts, they've done enough away from home that I think they've come up here.
And this is one of the things that I think our staff is very, very good about that other bracketologists are not. You hear top 50 wins, top 100 wins. Well, like if you beat a top 50 team at home and that top 50 team is 3-7 on the road, that's really not that good of a win. Beating Cal at home is not a good win. It's not. Everybody that they've played on the road has done it.
Joby, is there anybody here? Is there anybody that we have not called their names of yet that you think is an egregious omission that did not make one of these?
Egregious, no, because the only change I have is my 16 team, which I presume we'll see on the 5, was there instead of my 17 team, which is the Utah team we just discussed. I did have Louisville in this group based on the strength of the North Carolina win. There was a little bit of a recency factor there. They have the talent to be able to
Joey,
do it.
I'm going to upset you a little bit by revealing the 5 seeds, which are not going to include the Louisville Cardinals.
Wow.
Which will show you how the rest of us rated Louisville. But Baylor, Purdue, Providence, and Dayton filling out the 5 line.
2 of those were just awful. So lay it out there. 2 of those are awful.
Well, let me ask you this. Well, what two are awful then? Because
Yeah,
I
not
think
the
I
two
think
maybe you think, because I am on the Purdue and Dayton bandwagons here.
okay. Sounds
Baylor
good.
hasn't done jack against the field except for one win, and Providence may have the best single win of this season. Single. I stress single. I can't rate them almost a protected seed just because they had one amazing night when it's been followed by some very subpar nights.
Well, I'm kind of upset that
Losing
John
to
isn't
DePaul
here.
is a little subpar. I mean, slightly.
David, you and John both had Providence rated on the 4 line, actually, so I'm going to let you speak on behalf of John and yourself here and defend Providence.
Basically because
Frankly, I had them a lot lower. I had them 20th overall, so.
yeah, Providence is very, very schizophrenic. I mean, their good is amazing. Their bad is head scratching. It's your basic, typical Providence profile. They're always all over the place. But the win at Villanova, as Joby said, was one of the best ones that anyone has managed all year. They beat Arizona when Arizona had Tarczewski, and I forget the name of the other starter that they've lost. But they beat a full-strength Arizona team. I think the win at Butler, they deserve a lot of credit for because Butler is sort of a home court hero. I think the win at Georgetown was good. I think the win at Creighton was good, another home court hero, even though they're really not in the field. They have only one true road loss. That's pretty impressive. Now, again, the asterisk to this is the one true road loss they have should perhaps count as 3 or 4 true road losses when you lose all like that. But overall, I just like them. That's why I have them up there, is because of I think the good on their profile is better than anyone else in the in the 3 or 4 or on the 4 line. But having said that, they're schizophrenic. The bad on their profile is worse than anyone perhaps on the 5 or 6 line.
Well, I'm going to take up the case here for Baylor, the other team that Joby criticized, and I agree with you. They only have one win against a team that is going to be in the field as an at-large, and a very nice win that went Iowa State.
Nice win yeah.
Now, they do have 3 other wins against teams that will be in this field by beating Stephen F. Austin, New Mexico State, and Texas Southern. But I won't go there too far. But the thing
I started off agreeing with you. And
but we just talked about Providence's bad and how bad Providence's bad is. Baylor, there is no bad. Their worst loss is at home to Texas. Every other loss at Oregon, at A&M, at Kansas, home to Oklahoma. They do not have a loss to anybody that is below them in the country, and that is that is why I have them this high. I still think that they're a very good team, and this is another team that obviously is going to have the chance to prove itself playing in the Big 12. Games at West Virginia, at Oklahoma, at Texas left, home against Iowa State, Kansas, and West Virginia as well. But I really do like this Baylor team, and I think that they deserve to be on the 5 line. Are we ready for the 6 line?
We're ready for the 6.
Okay, drum roll, please, and here it comes. On the 6 line, we have the Duke Blue Devils, USC, Arizona, and Joby Gibson Louisville team.
Maryland and Duke! Maryland and Duke!
And there it is. This is one of the things I've been waiting to reveal.
Yes!
I don't agree that Duke is a 6th seed, but for the chance to match them up in Providence with a potential round of 32 game with Maryland, I will agree with it.
Yeah. Louisville, I'm just not that big on them. I'm starting to like them a little more. They did have the win against North Carolina, and that is a good win, but oh, Lord. It just seems like whenever they have a chance to impress me on the road, they fail to do so. And, Virginia just skated by them over the weekend. Just
Yeah, that was quite a game, Joby. But Joby, your thoughts on what came up on this 6 line, and
I can't disagree with it too much. I mean, I think every one of those teams is in my field at this point. USC, I'm surprised is a little. I had USC on the 5 line, but those Pac-12 teams start to merge together a lot of the times, and we've already discussed Louisville from my perspective.
All right, let's go ahead then and reveal the 7 line as we bask in the glories of what may be a Maryland Duke second round game. And here we come in with Kentucky,
Wow, both of them.
Whoa.
with Virginia there, Joby, Indiana, Pitt, and Notre Dame.
Yeah, thanks a lot there.
No problem.
Because this Kentucky team screams the Kentucky team that was an 8 seed and made it to the final.
Yeah, we really did not do any favors there for Virginia having to play Kentucky. But let's take a look at these teams here. David, your thoughts on these 4 teams and whether these are the right 4 teams here?
I think. I think they are. I was surprised when I looked at them how much I liked Pittsburgh because I had not had much good to say about them. But you look at their paper and you realize they're pretty good, and you watch them play, albeit minus the game against Louisville, and you're like, they're a pretty good.
Yeah.
Pittsburgh's pretty good. I think this is about where they belong. Notre Dame, I had them close to here. Indiana, I was not really big on them at all because they had a lot of decent wins, but no real good wins. I thought they were certainly in the field, but I didn't even have them wearing white, I don't think, until they beat Michigan earlier this week. That was a really nice win for them. But what about Kentucky? Kentucky comes out and plays for 40 minutes as well as anybody has played at any point this year. Loses in overtime. They overcame foul trouble. They overcame a very hostile environment. Every time in that game against Kansas, momentum seemed to be shifting away from them. They made a big play, and they followed that up by losing at Tennessee.
Well, I wanted to address this Kentucky team here. Joe, I'll get to you in a second on them, but I was the outlier on Kentucky. I would have had them right here, potentially playing Virginia, but I would have had them at the 10 seed and not the 7 line. When I look at this Kentucky team now, you have 5 losses to teams that are not going to be, most likely not going to be in this field. UCLA, Ohio State, LSU, Tennessee, Auburn. That's more than I think any team that we've put in the field so far. And that's a huge, huge negative. Yeah, they beat Louisville. It was at home. Yeah, they beat a very mediocre Duke team on a neutral court. And who else did they beat that's in this field? No one else that we've mentioned yet. Yeah. At Alabama, at Arkansas. Joby, I don't see it with Kentucky. If it's not for the name, I think Kentucky is 3 or 4 lines lower.
Well, and I had him as one of my 6s, so that's why I drug him up here. I will admit the paper needs help, plain and simple. But when I see him play, you see those flashes, and we talked about the Kansas game already. I tend, and we hear this, one of David's big things is road wins. Chad, one of your big things is losses of some sort. Mine are very much mine, and I'm cutting against myself, mine is very much wins against the field. I do the exception here because of how they've played, and maybe it is the jerseys getting me a little starry-eyed here. Maybe I need to reevaluate that.
I just, like I said, I think they belong in the 7-10 game. I think that they belong on the other side of it. I was by far the outlier here. The 3 ballots were all fairly close.
I mean, you could make a case for it. I think that the one thing that got me, and I realize that the committee will not look at it this way. And this is sort of like faint praise. The one thing that impressed me the most about Kentucky was one of the games that they lost. I think that's what ultimately made me put them as high as I did. I think I had them as my last 6.
Well, let's go ahead and reveal the 8 line here. And here's where we see Colorado, Wichita State, Michigan, and VCU. Wichita State, not a paper pick, but clearly an eye test pick, especially with the Van Vliet injury to compensate for some of those games. But, Joby, let me start with you. Your thoughts on these 8 seeds?
I think Michigan's a little high, but they beat Maryland. I understand that, but you've already heard me. I'm not as high on Maryland, so I don't value that win maybe as much as others do. It's a good win. Don't get me wrong. It's a good win against a team in the field and most likely protected seed. But it's not something to hang your hat on. They've kind of been a middling team. They got their doors blown out by Indiana this week. Maybe the recency factor is getting me. And on Indiana, Indiana is tied for the lead in the conference. So I do appreciate them being a line up ahead of Michigan. But I drop Michigan is in my field. But I drop them a couple of seed lines, to be honest.
David, you and I both had Wichita State actually a line or two higher than this.
Yeah.
A couple other brackets drug them down. Your thoughts on this Wichita State team? Because I really think that they are playing even better than an 8 seed right now.
Yeah,
it kind of really hurts Iowa with this potential matchup in the second round with them.
right. They are blowing past everybody they're playing. I know they're not playing NCAA tournament caliber teams, but they're playing in situations to where when they go on the road, it's the other team's Super Bowl. I hate that term, but I'll use it this week. And they're just blowing everybody out. They have one loss basically at full strength. It was at Seton Hall, barely. And I just think that when you evaluate what they've done with the team that they are now, they have one loss. And, yeah, I mean, I had them, I think, 25th overall. I'm very high up on the 7 line. And I realize it's one of those kind of anomalies to where sometimes a team's paper does not match at all how good they are or how well they're playing at the end. But you said it. If you're Iowa and you see this and you've earned a 1 seed and you like to think that you've earned a halfway manageable path, what's your opinion? How do you feel when you see Wichita State in that round of 32? No, I think Iowa would beat them, but
you know what?
Was really good.
I have to slightly diverge here. And while I had Wichita State, I think on this line or right around here, I don't want to just because Van Fleet is gone doesn't mean you give them a win there.
I'm not giving them a win.
If you say those games don't count, let's just say they don't.
Okay, yeah.
What their resume is Little Rock. I mean that's what it is. They don't have great wins. They don't have a lot of great wins here.
I agree they don't have the great wins,
Yeah.
but
It's
this
because
is
they haven't had
eye
the
test. This
opportunity
is eye
full
test.
strength. You can argue, but by the same token, you can't just say, "Oh, we'll give you a pass here." I actually think you got to give him one of those losses. The first loss, he played a portion of the game. I don't care.
Yeah.
You lost the game. Tulsa's sorry. And
losing to Tulsa is sorry. It's very sorry.
I don't count that. I don't count that as It's as if he got in bad foul trouble. It's the equivalent. He had to. His time in the game was shortened. The fact of the matter is, it's a good team. It deserves this seed spot, but I'd get very nervous pushing it any further. And I don't know, as someone who's a fan of a team who might face a 7, 8, 9, 10 team, Wichita State wouldn't be the team that scares me out of this group. Kentucky would, but not Wichita State.
Let me go ahead and pull up the 9 seeds. This is the first time we're going to see actual first-round matchups being shown here. Seton Hall, Florida State going up against Colorado, Florida State getting Wichita State, Michigan versus Florida, VCU versus South Carolina. A pair of SEC teams in here, along with the Seminoles and the Pirates.
Wow.
David, you're saying wow, so let me start with you then.
I didn't think people would value Florida State as much as I did, but I guess they did.
Well, actually, Joby, you valued Florida State higher than any of us, and I kind of agree. I actually valued them the second highest, even above David. Joby, I'm on board with you on this. Florida State. Go ahead.
They've done it in conference, out of conference. When we talk about this, is where my valuations come into play. Like I said, Chad talking about losses, David talking about road wins. Mine are strength wins against the field. And it's not just an ACC win when you catch Virginia being lackluster on the road. They won that game fair and square. That's a great win. But it's also VCU's looking like a hell of a win. They're in the they're in the bracket already right now. Florida is on this line, and it was a road win. Florida State is certainly deserving here, and I actually think they should be wearing white.
And I would tell you, when I look at Florida State, the other thing, and you mentioned that one of the things I always look at is who did you lose to. While they do have 7 losses right now, 5 of those losses are top 27, basically top 25 teams, including 2 top 10 losses. The other 2 losses that are outside the top 50 are at Clemson and a neutral court against Hofstra, which are a couple of teams that we are going to probably have discussions about at some point in the next 20 minutes or so. David, though, What about the two SEC teams here, Florida, South Carolina? You agree with that?
I do. I know South Carolina has a bloated record. They're in the rankings, but again, who have they beaten that's any higher than this? Paper-wise, I think this is where they belong. Eye test-wise, I think this is where they belong. I have no problems with them right here. I think this is exactly the line I had them on. I had Florida a little lower, but no, I had Florida much higher.
You had Florida much higher.
Yeah.
John, who's not with us tonight, actually had Seton Hall all the way up at 25 overall on his seed list. He was a big divergent there in Seton Hall, but the other three of us kind of agreed on Seton Hall being right around here.
Yeah.
But
I
let's go.
had a line lower, didn't I? Or a couple lines lower, actually.
Yeah, you had them a little bit lower. Actually, you had Seton Hall lower than this. But
Yeah.
let's go ahead and reveal the 10 line here. And in the 10 line,
Let's have our discussion.
this is where we're going to have a little bit of a discussion,
I'm
Joby.
glad the team that they're next to, because that's my point.
Let's start. Syracuse matching up with Kentucky, Monmouth matching up with Pittsburgh, Washington matching up with Notre Dame. But Joby, Clemson would have been a lot lower, except for the fact that you had them on your 6th line. So
Yes,
I'm going to let you defend this.
Yes, I did, and I'm more than happy to explain why. As I said, one of my top criteria are wins against the field.
Okay,
Tell me,
I'm ready.
Mr. Griggs, how many teams have more wins than Clemson against the field right now? How many?
Yeah.
That's it. Only 2 teams have more wins against the field. Only 2 in the entire country. Clemson has 6 wins. Now, you say, oh, well, they have the 2 bad losses. Well, they're sitting right next to Monmouth, which I think Monmouth is very deserving of that 10 spot, by the way.
Yeah.
Monmouth has 3 losses that I would argue are worse than even the Minnesota-type losses Clemson has. Monmouth, though, has 3 really good wins. Clemson has 6 of them. So, one team has fewer bad losses. I think we all agree Monmouth should be a 10. I do.
Yeah.
And then you do a comparison between the 2 numbers. Clemson has fewer bad losses and 3 more really good, strong wins. The one thing Clemson could do is they could win a little more on the road. I know I'm going to hear that from David. But this is that you just can't ignore they've beaten teams you're going to play in the tournament. And the losses were early. Recency, they're running 6. They only have 3 losses in ACC play. You almost have to downplay the early losses and look what they're doing now with some really great, outstanding work.
I think Clemson is definitely thundering in the right direction. They get those road wins, even if they're getting them against teams that aren't tournament teams. I think they're going to be very safely inside the bubble. But I mean, the 6th line is just. I just don't think that they're up there with, the teams.
I think that if you give them Dayton's schedule and Clemson, the only problem for Clemson is they wouldn't have enough opportunities to win those games. But it's not like Dayton has to escape. Miami of Ohio. I mean, and I like Dayton. I had them on the 5 line, but Clemson's proven it. The proof is in the pudding, and they've proven it.
Wow.
Well, let's take a quick look. Let's move over here next to the 11 line. We are actually going to, I believe, hit our first 4 teams on this line, surprisingly enough. But here we go. UConn coming in and Cincinnati, both are American teams on the 11 line. A great great Midwest / Conference USA matchup there, Louisville and Cincinnati.
Oh, that would be fun.
Duke and UConn, also a very fun matchup there in Providence. Little Rock and USC. And our first 4 teams were Butler and St. Joe's. The winner of that game getting Arizona. St. Joe's a huge faller off of where we've been ranking them, and I think it all has to do with what they did last night, losing that game at home to St. Bonaventure.
It wasn't good.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'll let you go.
I turned the game off when I think they were down by 17 with a few minutes to go. I just decided to watch something else. They had an off night, yeah.
But really, the problem with St. Joe's is that they don't have the marquee win at the top. And the good thing that I liked about them, they also lacked the bad losses. Now, I mean, St. Bonaventure is not an awful team, but the fact that they lose them at home, that really dinged them, and it really put a blemish on their profile that they didn't have before this.
Yeah. Now I have to ask Chad because I'm assuming Little Rock. Well, they're the highest Sun Belt team. Are they inside the first four?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Are they inside the first four? Give me that. Give me half a second. That they actually came in. Yes, they came in inside the first four. This line was ranked Cincinnati, UConn, Little Rock, Butler, and Butler came in fourth on this line. St. Joe's. Actually, there's a team in between Butler and St. Joe's on our seed list, but that would not be allowed to match up with Butler because it would have been an automatic bid qualifier. But yes, Little Rock actually came in inside the first four.
And I definitely think they belong there. I find it kind of alarming that no one nationally is paying any attention to them. I realize they're buried on Sunbelt internet streams, but they're a really good team. Only 2 losses. Not saying that they deserve a protected seed or even in white or even in on the first ballot. That was our bad, Chad. We forgot to explain after the 9 line. Essentially, there's 36 at-large bids, so anyone that gets in after the 9 line needs someone 9 or better to win a conference championship first before they can get in. Generally, that's going to be in the neighborhood of 7 to 10 teams, so the 10 line is pretty safe. But I think Little Rock belongs inside the first 4.
As of this moment, I would agree with David, but if they become an at-large team, this is what I say a lot when I talk about the nitty-gritty ratings.
Yeah.
If they need the at-large team, UTA is no longer that team that can help them out.
They've hit a little bit of a skid.
Yeah, and so they lose a game, it's going to be a bad loss. Does that bad loss, and it very well may, kick them below the first 4 and make them not an at-large worthy team? That's what
my argument is that if that loss happens in the conference tournament, I think they're okay. If it happens during the regular season, then obviously you've got to factor in a second bad loss in the conference tournament, and that's where I worry.
And I guess, and we have this argument every year, and I don't, again, to reiterate, I don't think the real committee looks at it the way that I do. But in my opinion, if you beat a team during the regular season and you finish several games ahead of them in the conference standings, and you beat them, especially if it's a team you beat twice, if they beat you in the conference tournament, I don't think you should be penalized, because you wouldn't reward a team for beating a team they've already beaten twice and finished ahead of. Why would you penalize them when they've already proven themselves to be better? So I realize the real committee will penalize them for the reasons, and it would probably be looked at as a bad loss. But I think if you're an outright first-place finisher, you kind of need to throw out what happens in the conference tournament, in my opinion.
Well, let's move on to the 12 line, and this will conclude our at-large bids. Here we go. Chattanooga matching up with Baylor, Valpo against Purdue in an All-Indiana battle there, St. Mary's, and Cal and Gonzaga being our last 2 at-large teams. A bit of a surprise there. Now, let me just explain the order that these teams came in. Valpo was a team that was actually in between Butler and St. Joe's on the overall seed list here. Cal came in right after St. Joe's. The next 2 teams after California were St. Mary's, the automatic qualifier out of the West Coast, then Chattanooga out of the SoCon, who made it inside the bubble. Gonzaga then making our last at-large bid. So in our consensus brackets, both Chattanooga and St. Mary's were inside the field as well. So this entire line was. David, your thoughts on what you see here?
I like Valpo much more than this. I think they're a better team than Monmouth. I realize that the paper, you kind of have to look at it a little more closely, but I think the win at Oregon State was really good. I thought the win at Oakland, on Oakland's campus, was good. I realize that they do have one really sour loss at Wright State, but I just think that I mean, and it is more of an eye test thing. I think Valpo is a really good team. I think that they're one of the 30, perhaps. I easily think they're one of the 40 best teams on the court.
Well, Joby, can you address Valpo, because you're the one that kind of helped knock them down, because you didn't have them
they have 2 bad losses. They have 2 bad losses. no wins against the field. That my criteria, and 2 bad losses, as opposed to Monmouth 3-3, Clemson, like we talked about before, 6-2.
Well, Ball State's been formidable at home. It's not a good loss. I'm not going to sit there and say you should discount it.
You should beat up. You should beat up on that as much as losing at Minnesota.
I'm
just saying. And the fact of the matter is, they're good. They are. I have seen them play. They are a solid team, and I think there are so many solid teams. Your Little Rocks, your Monmouths, your Chattanoogas, your Hofstras, which we'll address probably in the 13 line. There are so many good teams that are going to upset 4 seeds this year. Whoever is that team that falls to the 13 line, I would not want to be a 4 seed this year, because you have a really good shot at losing.
Well, let's reveal that 13 line actually right now before I go into the top 4 teams out, because actually the very next team that would right below Gonzaga according to our rankings is an automatic bid winner, and that's the San Diego State team we were just discussing. Right after them came a little bit lower down on the overall, but Hofstra, Akron, and UC Irvine finishing out the 13 line here. A couple really good teams though, that Hofstra team and the San Diego State.
Hofstra beats Utah. Mark my words. I would mark it on my bracket. If this was the real thing, I'd pick Hofstra over Utah. I'd call it right now.
Let me also now quickly, we're going to focus on the bottom of the screen there. You see where it says the top 4 out. This is the list of the top 4 teams that received votes that did not make the field as at-larges. UCLA, Wisconsin, LSU, George Washington in that order. A couple of surprising names there, both LSU and GW, still pretty close. Joby, your thoughts on who made it, and do you want to make a case that one of these 4 teams or somebody else should have made it into this?
My last 2 teams in actually were those first 2, UCLA and Wisconsin, but I don't feel lovely and comfortable with them. So it's not like I had them in instead of, for instance, St. Joe's, who doesn't have a win against a team in our field, but I had St. Joe's the first team out in that case, so it was like one dozen the other, and I had GW and LSU down the line but out. So I can't really disagree too much. LSU and GW have some nice wins. GW obviously the win early against Virginia. LSU had that blowout win over Kentucky. If they perform down the stretch, get good wins. GW against the top of the A10, LSU against the top of the SEC. They can play their way in. They are not out of it. And Wisconsin is actually showing it right now in the Big Ten. I had left them for dead. And Wisconsin, if they continue on their surge, we're going to have them in our field in a couple of weeks.
I think they play their way in. The way they're going, their next 2 games are winnable. I think that gets them to 15-9. They got 2 really, really strong tests after that. If they win 3 of their next 4, and they should absolutely win at least 2 of their next 4, I think they're suddenly inside the bubble.
Well, David, I want to have you answer the same question there. Is there somebody that you would knock out that we put in exchange for one of these teams, or somebody else that's not even on this list?
Well, California really, really has me holding my nose when I see them in the field. I mean, and so does Gonzaga. And Gonzaga's paper isn't terrible by bubble team standards, but their team is awful. I mean, you watch them; they're just not any good. Cal, 1 true road win. I really don't like either one of those teams. I think that I would have Whiskey and perhaps I like Whiskey better than both of them. I think I like UCLA better than both of them. But this just gets back to one of the things I've been saying ever since we changed the format. The field is too big.
Okay, let me, Joby, you're one of the reasons that Cal actually made the field. You had them rated very highly. You want to defend them?
Yeah, and their athletic, their AD who did their scheduling should be shot.
Yeah,
because he didn't give them the opportunities to do road wins. The only road games they had out of conference were like at Virginia, where they played Virginia, who's a 2-seed tight. So they've had kind of a lack of opportunities, and so then when we get to Pac-12 play and they haven't really exploded on the road, you have a very legitimate argument from David. But by the same token, they are getting those wins where they need to. Your St. Mary's automatic qualifier, but inside the bubble, team right now, out of conference, and some solid Pac-12 wins against the top echelons of the Pac-12.
Yeah,
I have them in. They're still wearing dark jerseys on my board, but I do have them.
I actually had Cal as my very last team in, so they actually end up being right where I had them on my. And really, my problem with Cal, I look at it, you see the 4 top 50 wins, all against teams in the field, including Colorado, Utah, Arizona. But then I say, well, what about the David Griggs argument? They have one road win. It was at Wyoming. And it's really tough. Then I look at kind of my argument of, well, do you have the bad losses? The only sub 60 loss is a neutral site game to Richmond, who's not an awful team.
Yeah.
The rest of their losses are all against teams that are either in this field or at least in the discussion. So it was a real debate back and forth for me on this team. I know they've also lost 5 out of 7 right now. They're going to have their chances to prove themselves, and they better do that over the last few weeks. That's all I got to say.
In looking at our... Go ahead, Joey.
They and Wisconsin are 2 attractive teams here to me because they have, under the criteria I lay out, they each have 4 wins against the field. And that's a heck of a lot more than almost any other bubble team in this region. When I pick on St. Joe's for having 0, I think that should have weight.
Just a general comment / observation, and I want to see if you all agree with me. And again, this is our staff bracket. The 11 line up, I think everyone belongs in. I feel good about it. I look at the 12 line. I think Valpo belongs in. I feel fairly good about Chattanooga. And then after that, it's a drop off, and it isn't even. It just seems like who stinks the least after you get past team 46, I guess it is. Do you agree? Or
I think that's a fair observation. I just wanted to.
St. Joe's deserves to be in the who stinks the least category.
Yeah, I think the St. Joe's, maybe even Butler, although they got a nice win.
Butler too. I didn't have Butler in.
I feel better about those 2 than Cal, Gonzaga, UCLA. Whiskey, I'm starting to feel a little bit better about, but I mean, it's just. I know it's a 68-team tournament. 68 teams are getting in, regardless of whether we like it or not. But
here's the next 5 teams that got consideration. Temple, thanks mostly to Stalika, who's been very high on them for some reason I haven't figured out. Yeah. Oregon State, Stanford, Georgetown, and the middle team there is the team that's on the list because of me. St. Bonaventure, and I did not have them in my field, but they were one of my first teams out. A huge move up for me personally on the Bonnies, and I just think that this is another profile where there's nothing really bad on it, and you add in something incredibly good last night with that win at St. Joe's, and now you got to start paying attention to the Bonnies suddenly.
Yeah.
Now you're losing Lenardi logic. Because St. Joe's lost to a team that's now on the board, we need to move St. Joe's up.
It is a little circular. I agree with that.
They were 7th out of mine, which at least you're thinking about them.
And that's all I'll say is I think it's time to start thinking about them. They do have GW at home. They have a road trip to Dayton left. They got St. Joe's at home, so they'll have a few more chances even before the 8-10 tournament.
And let me say one last thing, if it's okay, about Stanford. I can't go for a team whose overall record is that awful. At some point, you have to actually have a winning record. I'm sorry. More than 1 game over 500. It's disqualifying.
Joby, I did not even – I actually ended up ranking about 15 teams beyond the field personally. Stanford was not even in that list. We can thank Stalika again for Stanford.
Who put him up there?
It's Stalika. He had them 52nd overall, just missing the field. So, but let's go ahead and very quickly run through the last couple of lines here. On the 14 line, we see South Dakota State versus Maryland, Yale against Texas A&M, UAB getting West Virginia, and Stony Brook against Michigan State.
Oh man, I like Stony Brook.
That's pretty good.
They don't. I mean, I hope they have a. I think Stony Brook can really step up on someone and squeeze them, but it has to be someone a little more brain dead than Michigan State.
Yeah, Stony Brook was actually the top seed on this 14 line as well. Yeah. The 15 line, we got North Florida getting Virginia. So another tough game before they even get to Kentucky. Asheville against Kansas, Belmont against North Carolina, and Oregon versus Montana.
Stony Brook would beat Maryland, by the way. Just like lay that
They
down.
would. I think they would. I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't say that I would expect it, but I wouldn't be totally shocked by it.
Finally, the 16 line. We got SFA versus Oklahoma, New Mexico State getting on Iowa. We got Texas Southern versus Wagner to take on Xavier, Hampton versus Bucknell to take on Villanova. Any thoughts on the last few lines here, Joby?
Well, I will say what everybody who watches these podcasts say. You are incorrect. New Mexico State will not be
Yes.
the 16th.
Lopes waiver.
Check a state over,
Yeah.
simply known as Lopes waiver. Sign the petition today.
It is. Sign it if you haven't.
David, any other thoughts about the bracket as a whole? Even let's.
I mean, I'm not happy with 100% of it, but I think I like or at least agree with 90% of it. Last year, it was about the same with the one that our staff put together. I liked about 90% of it, which was way better than the one the real committee put together. I like that about 65 to 70%. I always end up liking our tournament better.
And Joby, any other thoughts or any final thoughts, really? Because I think we're pretty much out of time.
No, I will let it go with my Blossing game Clemson ramble forgotten after this, after we shut off here.
Okay. All right. Well, then, on that note, I do want to thank everybody for joining us. On behalf of David Griggs and Joby Fortson, I'm Chad Sherwood. Thanks for joining us, everybody. We'll talk to you again next week. Have a great night.